October 31st, 1973. Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a dusky orange as children flooded the sidewalks in costume. Laughter echoed through the sleepy Midwestern town. Little witches, cowboys, ghosts, and skeletons went door to door gripping pillowcases and plastic pumpkins, all chasing the same sweet prize, candy. But somewhere in that crisp autumn air, something sinister was hiding. 9-year-old Lisa and French had waited all month for Halloween. She was supposed to be a butterfly. Her wings were ready, but that night, the Wisconsin chill forced her mother to improvise. Instead of a bright insect, Lisa stepped out wearing a hodgepodge of home-found pieces, a green parka, red pants, and a floppy black hat. It wasn't perfect, but she didn't care. Candy awaited. Lisa's mom told her to be home by 7 p.m. sharp. The plan was simple: visit a few familiar houses, then meet other kids at a neighborhood Halloween party hosted by local parents. It was supposed to be safe. That year, the town had been spooked by national headlines about tainted candy, razor blades in apples, poison in pixie sticks, and parents were on edge. Hosting a supervised party was their way to fight fear with fun. But Lisa never made it to the party. She never even made it past the third house. And within hours, the entire town would begin a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. This is the story of a little girl who trusted her neighbors, and the man who betrayed that trust in the darkest way imaginable. It began quietly. Lisa left her home around 6 p.m., eager and smiling. She was supposed to go trick-or-treating with a friend, but a last-minute punishment kept that friend grounded. So Lisa went alone, not uncommon in their tight-knit community. Her mom wasn't too worried. Lisa was responsible. Everyone knew her, and kids were everywhere that night. Surely nothing could go wrong. She knocked on her classmate's door, got candy, then went to her teacher's house, got more, and then silence. A complete and terrifying silence. By 7 o'clock, Lisa's mother began to fidget. By 7:30, she was walking the neighborhood, calling her name. By 8 o'clock, she was knocking on doors, panicked. And by 9 o'clock, Lisa was officially missing. That same night, police were alerted. Officers scoured the area while more and more neighbors joined in. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Names were shouted. Porch lights flicked on and off like signals. But nothing. No one had seen her. No one had heard a scream. She had vanished into thin air, just minutes from her own front porch. The next morning, the town of Fond du Lac awoke with a hole in its heart. More volunteers showed up. Schools buzzed with whispers and worry. Parents held their kids a little closer. Flyers with Lisa's freckled face were plastered everywhere. Gas stations offered free fuel to searchers. Police dogs sniffed trails that vanished at sidewalks. The numbers grew. 1,000 searchers, then 3,000, then over 5,000. They searched the woods, rivers, ditches, barns, culverts, and attics. They searched because they believed. They searched because they were afraid. And then, after 4 days of desperate hope, a farmer made a discovery that would scar the town forever. If this story grips you, if Lisa's face, her innocence, and the horror of that night stir something in you, stay with us. Because the twist that cracked this case didn't just change one family's life. It changed an entire community's idea of safety. And it made Halloween, for many, a time of mourning instead of magic. Subscribe, follow, share her name, Lisa and French. This is only the beginning. The sun had barely risen on November 3rd, 1973. For long days since Lisa and French vanished, search parties were exhausted, hopes were fraying, and whispers began to swirl. What if she ran away? What if she just got lost? But those who knew Lisa knew better. She was cautious, smart, friendly, but never reckless. Then a call came in. A farmer driving through a nearby rural stretch in the small town of Techita, just 3 miles from Lisa's house, spotted something strange near the roadside. 2 garbage bags, just sitting there. One partially torn, something pale poking through. He pulled over, thinking it might be trash dumped illegally, but as he got closer, his heart sank. Inside one of the bags was the lifeless body of a child. In the other, her clothes. It was Lisa. The farmer ran to the nearest house and called the police. The town's worst fears had just come true. News traveled fast. Too fast. By the time officers arrived, dozens of horrified locals were already standing nearby, some sobbing, others frozen in place. Lisa's body was removed quietly, her identity confirmed. And then total disbelief. A town that once opened doors to one another now slammed them shut. Halloween decorations were yanked down. Jack-o'-lanterns turned to shriveled ghosts of joy. And parents held their children tighter than ever before. Lisa had not just died. She had been assaulted. She had not just disappeared. She had been murdered. But even in that wave of grief, something even more chilling emerged. According to the autopsy, Lisa hadn't died from strangulation as initially suspected. She died from shock, a body so overwhelmed by trauma that it simply shut down. She suffered, and she suffered alone. The killer hadn't left fingerprints. Not on her body, not on her clothes, not even on the garbage bags. But they had left something: fibers, stray threads, one single hair. In 1973, DNA testing wasn't available. So investigators had to rely on basic forensics and instinct, and both would soon point them down a path they never expected. The town mourned Lisa's death in numbers not seen before. Thousands attended her funeral, so many, in fact, that lines formed outside the doors of the church and stretched down the street. People who'd never met Lisa came just to grieve, just to show the French family that they weren't alone. But sorrow quickly turned to outrage. Who did this? Why Lisa? How could anyone harm a child on Halloween? Police were under pressure. Politicians made promises, and behind closed doors, detectives began working around the clock. There were no security cameras, no doorbell footage, no social media to alert the town instantly. Just the memory of where she was last seen, and a cold, brutal fact: someone in her immediate neighborhood may have killed her. Someone who had answered their door to a little girl in costume and chose evil. The list of suspects was short. Lisa had only visited 2 houses before she vanished. A classmate's, her teacher's. Both homes were just minutes from her own. After that, nothing. Police considered 2 grim possibilities. A stranger had intercepted her, a kidnapper lurking in a parked car or walking the streets. Or someone she knew had opened their door and used her trust against her. Option 1 seemed unlikely. Lisa didn't talk to strangers. She wouldn't have just hopped into a car, especially not on Halloween night when other kids were around. There had been no screams, no witnesses, nothing out of place, which meant the second theory was far more plausible and infinitely more chilling. So, investigators went door to door, questioning every single person who lived along Lisa's route home. They asked about candy, costumes, trick-or-treaters, even porch lights. They looked for hesitation, slips in stories, nervous glances, and one name kept sticking out: Gerald Turner. Lisa had known him for years. He lived nearby, in a duplex. Their families had shared a wall. Lisa used to run over to play with his daughter. She'd show him her toys. He'd joke with her. She liked him. Turner wasn't a stranger. He was family adjacent, familiar, friendly. But detectives noticed something odd. When asked questions, Turner answered, but too precisely, too calmly. His words didn't feel right. There were no cracks, but no emotion either. Then they learned something that set off alarm bells. At the time Lisa went missing, Turner was home alone. His girlfriend and daughter were at a Halloween party, giving him an unsupervised, private window. The timeline matched too well, too cleanly, too perfectly. Turner wasn't just a neighbor anymore. He was a prime suspect, but suspicion alone wouldn't be enough. Not for this case, not for this town, not after Lisa. Police needed more than a hunch. They needed evidence, a confession, or both. And what came next was the start of a psychological war between a small-town police force and a man hiding a monstrous secret. Gerald Miles Turner, too, 24 years old, quiet, average, unremarkable. He lived just a few houses down from the Frenches with his girlfriend and their young daughter. To the outside world, he was a typical family man, a neighbor, a father, a partner. But beneath that mask, investigators believed, was something far darker. Lisa French had known Turner for years. Their families once lived in the same duplex, separated only by a shared wall. She used to dash over to show off her new toys, chat with him, laugh. She felt safe around him. That's what made it so easy. And that's what made it so terrifying. The police didn't confront Turner outright, not at first. They circled him. They watched. They asked neighbors subtle questions. When they finally knocked on his door, Turner answered like any other concerned resident. He expressed sympathy, said all the right things, but detectives sensed something off. His voice lacked emotion. His reactions were too measured. He seemed rehearsed. Still, nothing he said was incriminating, just strange. They needed more. So they asked him to take a polygraph. Turner agreed. The test flagged several of his answers as inconclusive, especially those related to the night Lisa disappeared. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it wasn't nothing either. When they asked him to take another polygraph later, he refused. That refusal, paired with the growing suspicion, pushed detectives to dig deeper. They obtained a warrant to search Turner's home and collect hair samples. In his bedroom, they found something that made their heart stop. A bedspread, the same color and fabric as fibers recovered from Lisa's clothes. And that single hair found on Lisa? It matched Turner's hair in color and texture. But again, this was 1973. DNA technology was still science fiction. There was no way to prove a match. Frustrating, agonizing, but enough to justify further pressure. Still, Turner held firm. He denied everything. His girlfriend was next. Detectives asked for a timeline of her Halloween night. She told them that she had gone out to a party with her daughter and left Turner at home. They returned around 7:15 p.m., just after Lisa would have been on his street. When they walked in, she recalled Turner was lying on the couch wearing a bathrobe. He said he wasn't feeling well, claimed he was nauseous, feverish, but then something strange. He kept getting up, going into the bedroom, coming out again, back and forth, restless, agitated. He told her not to come in, to let him rest. He insisted he didn't want to be disturbed. Then not long after, she and their daughter left again to visit her mother. It was the perfect storm. He had privacy. He had opportunity. He had a relationship with Lisa that made her feel safe enough to knock. And now he had no alibi. Months passed. Still no confession. Still no charges. Police knew he did it. But knowing and proving were two very different things. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother was spiraling. The grief was unbearable. She was also pregnant, trying to prepare for the arrival of another child while mourning the one she lost. The French family lived in limbo. The whole town did. And Turner? He went about his life like nothing had happened. But detectives weren't done. They were watching, waiting. And in the summer of 1974, they would finally crack him. On August 8, 1974, 9 months after Lisa's murder, police brought Gerald Turner in for another round of questioning. This time, it wasn't a casual chat. It wasn't polite. They told him what they knew. They laid out the timeline. They showed him the evidence. They told him about the hair, the fibers, the witnesses, the suspicions, and slowly something shifted. Turner leaned back. He stared at the table. His voice got quieter. And then, finally, he began to speak. What he confessed to would leave detectives sick to their stomachs. The full horror of Lisa French's final moments was more depraved than anyone imagined. In the days following Gerald Turner's confession, the town of Fond du Lac was swept by a tidal wave of emotions: shock, rage, heartbreak, disbelief. The man who had once been the friendly neighbor, the young father who shared a wall with the Frenches, had now admitted to one of the most chilling crimes the state had ever seen. And not just the act itself, it was the way he described it. Clinical, detached, emotionless. Police officers, hardened by years on the job, left the room pale. One detective reportedly vomited after hearing the tape. Another wept in his car. Lisa had died in the hands of someone she trusted, and he hadn't just hurt her, he watched her body shut down in real time. He didn't run to get help. He didn't even try to resuscitate her. Instead, he treated her like garbage, wrapped her in plastic, stuffed her in trash bags, tossed her on the roadside like she was nothing. The press descended on the town again, but this time the narrative had changed. It wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a horror story, one with a name and a face. Gerald Turner, the so-called Halloween killer, was paraded on every newspaper front page. Local TV anchors struggled to hold back emotion as they read his confession aloud. The town's grief turned to fury. Protests erupted outside the courthouse. Hundreds chanted, "Never again." Mothers clutched their children like lifelines. One local woman said in an interview, "You raise your kids to trust the people next door, to knock on doors, to say please and thank you." Lisa did everything right. And look what happened. For Lisa's family, it was a storm that never stopped. Her mother, Mary Ann, attended court every single day. Pregnant with her next child, she sat just feet from the man who stole her daughter. She never looked away, not once. In a statement later, she said, "I wanted him to see my face. I wanted him to remember her eyes every time he closed his own." When Turner finally pleaded guilty, the courtroom was silent. There were no cheers, no applause, just quiet sobs, and one sentence that fell like a gavel on everyone's heart. Turner was sentenced to 38 years in prison. For some, it was justice. For others, it wasn't nearly enough. But for now, Lisa's family had what they needed: closure, accountability, a name to curse. Turner was sent to the Waupun Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. His cell was small, his contact with the outside world limited, but no matter how high the walls, he couldn't escape one thing. The entire country now knew what he was. Still, there were murmurs in the community, doubts. Would 38 years really mean life? What if he got out early? What if the system failed again? The thought seemed unthinkable. But in time, that fear would become reality. Because Gerald Turner wasn't done haunting this case. And Lisa's story wasn't finished either. Justice had come. But peace? That would take much, much longer. When a killer goes to prison, most people assume it's for good. They think that once the courtroom lights fade and the cell door slams shut, justice is done. That evil has been locked away forever. But Lisa and French's family was about to learn, in the harshest way possible, that the justice system has loopholes. And sometimes monsters walk free. Gerald Turner began his sentence in 1975. The town exhaled. Parents relaxed a little. Halloween crept back, though never quite the same. Turner stayed mostly silent in prison. He didn't appeal his sentence. He didn't speak to the media. He kept his head down. Serve his time. But the sentence, 38 years, wasn't what it seemed. Thanks to good behavior credits and early release provisions, Turner was eligible for parole much sooner than anyone expected. By the early 1990s, just 17 years after Lisa's murder, the unthinkable happened. Turner was released. The public reaction was immediate and explosive. Headlines screamed, "Child killer walks free." Lisa's killer back on the streets. Wisconsin's shame. People were furious. Lisa's family devastated. Her mother, now raising her youngest child, was forced to relive the nightmare all over again. She couldn't believe the man who admitted to luring, raping, and killing her daughter could be back in society. He was given a new residence in a halfway house. Protected, supervised, but free. And then, insult was added to injury. Turner's release came just days before Halloween, the anniversary of Lisa's death. "It's like they're mocking us," Lisa's mother said, "letting him walk free the very week our daughter died. It's a slap in the face." The community exploded in outrage. Vigils were held. Protests blocked intersections. Petitions to get him reincarcerated gained tens of thousands of signatures within days. Facing pressure, the Wisconsin Department of Justice reviewed the conditions of Turner's release. Then, in an unprecedented move, Prosecutors dug into his original case file, looking for anything that could justify revoking his parole. And they found it. While in prison, Turner had written graphic journal entries about the murder, not out of remorse, but seemingly as a twisted form of reliving it. In one passage, he detailed what Lisa said before she died. In another, he reflected on his own pleasure and how he tried to control himself, but couldn't. These weren't the writings of a man seeking forgiveness. They were fantasies. The public reaction to these journal entries was volcanic. The media labeled him a remorseless predator. Victim advocacy groups called for lifetime incarceration. Lisa's family demanded new laws. Eventually, authorities found a legal avenue to revoke his parole, and Turner was sent back to prison. Temporarily. But this began a vicious cycle. Turner would serve more time, then be eligible for release again. Each time, the community revolted, and the state would look for ways to keep him locked up longer. In 1998, he was released again, sparking another public meltdown, then reincarcerated due to parole violations, then released, then jailed again. Over and over, Lisa's family was forced to relive the trauma every time he reappeared in the headlines. But something important came out of this: Lisa's Law. Because of the outrage surrounding Turner's repeated parole attempts, Wisconsin lawmakers passed legislation making it harder for violent sex offenders to re-enter society, particularly those who had harmed children. Lisa's Law allowed prosecutors to pursue civil commitment, meaning even if an offender served their full criminal sentence, they could be detained indefinitely in a psychiatric facility if they were still deemed dangerous. In essence, a legal cage for those who couldn't be trusted outside one. Turner became one of the first to be targeted under this law. In 2003, as his prison sentence neared its end, Wisconsin officials filed to keep him confined under Lisa's Law, labeling him a sexually violent person too dangerous to release. And it worked. He was placed in a secure treatment facility for violent sexual predators. Not prison, but close. There he remains, as of now, still alive, still confined, still remembered for the worst reason imaginable. Lisa's mother never stopped fighting. Every parole hearing, every press conference, every candlelight vigil, she was there. She once said, "We had no choice. He took our daughter. We had to take back her memory." Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, was once the kind of place where you left your doors unlocked. Kids rode bikes until sunset. Parents knew each other by name. It was small, quiet, safe, the kind of town where a tragedy felt like something that only happened somewhere else. But after Halloween 1973, nothing was ever quite the same. The murder of Lisa and French didn't just break one family. It shattered an entire community. It taught them the unthinkable, that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they live next door. Sometimes they smile when they answer the doorbell. The street where Lisa lived still stands today. Houses have changed hands. New families have moved in. But for longtime residents, those blocks are still haunted. Older neighbors remember Lisa as the little girl who smiled at everyone, who loved the Girl Scouts, who was always excited about school, even on Mondays. One woman, a childhood friend of Lisa's, once said in an interview, "I remember her laugh. I remember her butterfly costume. I remember the last time I saw her. I was 5. I still think about it every Halloween." And Halloween itself? It changed forever in Fond du Lac. The town tightened trick-or-treat hours. Parents were required to accompany children. Schools and churches began organizing indoor Halloween events, safe zones where kids could collect candy in one building instead of wandering the streets. The image of Lisa's mismatched, last-minute costume is forever etched into Wisconsin's collective memory. It became a symbol, not of Halloween joy, but of innocence stolen. Lisa's story sparked conversations nationwide. Suddenly, schools began offering stranger danger training. Neighborhood watch groups sprang up across the country. Parents started double-checking who their kids talked to, even people they'd known for years. Lisa's name became more than a headline. It became a cautionary tale used in documentaries, school safety talks, and child protection advocacy for decades. And then there was Lisa's Law. Born from her family's relentless pursuit of justice, the law helped shape how states deal with violent sexual offenders. It gave courts the power to keep people like Gerald Turner locked away, even after their criminal sentences ended, if they were still deemed a danger to society. Lisa's law helped pave the way for modern sex offender registries and civil confinement laws used in states across the country. One small girl, one horrible night, and a ripple effect that changed legislation nationwide. Marianne French, Lisa's mother, became a quiet warrior. She never sought fame. She didn't write books. She didn't do speaking tours. But she showed up to every hearing, every legislative session, every media appearance when Gerald Turner's name resurfaced. She fought not just for her daughter, but for every other child who might be in danger. She once said, "I couldn't save Lisa, but maybe I can help protect someone else's little girl." Over the years, Lisa's grave became a pilgrimage site, not just for family, but for strangers. Children who never met her, parents who whispered thanks, survivors who left small toys or flowers. Every Halloween, candles are lit in her memory. Her photo, a sweet 9-year-old girl with big eyes and a crooked grin, is taped to windows, posted on signs, worn on buttons. Never forget Lisa, a simple phrase. But for Fond du Lac, and for Wisconsin, it means everything. True crime documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube videos have revisited the case again and again. Each time, a new generation hears her story. Each time, someone says, "How could this happen?" But more importantly, each time, someone remembers her name, and that, in the end, is her legacy. Not the horror, not the killer, but Lisa. She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She loved collecting rocks, riding her bike, and talking about what she wanted to be when she grew up. She wanted to be a teacher, just like the one she'd visited on Halloween night. And maybe in a way she is, because decades later, Lisa is still teaching the world something important. That we must protect our children, that evil doesn't wear a mask, and that one brave little girl's life, though tragically short, can still make a difference. Some names disappear with time. Lisa French's did not. Neither did Gerald Turner's. Though justice was served in the courtroom, the story didn't end there. In fact, for Lisa's family and the entire state of Wisconsin, the battle to keep her killer behind bars became a lifelong war. In 1998, Gerald Turner was released from prison again under intense scrutiny and public fury. By this point, he had already become a symbol not just of evil, but of a broken system. Every time he stepped foot outside prison walls, it felt like Lisa was being buried all over again. His new parole drew national media attention. Protesters showed up outside his halfway house. Wisconsin residents organized vigils. Children walked through the streets holding candles. Parents demanded answers from elected officials. Turner was forced to move from town to town, escorted by officers, rejected by communities, surrounded by outrage. But there was a new weapon in the legal arsenal, Lisa's law. Under this civil commitment law, a person convicted of a violent sex crime could be kept confined even after their sentence if they were found to have a mental disorder that made them likely to reoffend. Turner's psychological records painted a grim picture. He had written in his prison journal about Lisa's death, not with remorse, but with grotesque nostalgia. He described the assault in painstaking detail, referencing her final moments as if reliving them with satisfaction. Psychiatrists labeled him a continued threat to public safety. In 2003, the state of Wisconsin filed a petition to have Turner committed indefinitely under Lisa's law. This time, the goal was clear. He would never walk free again. Turner fought it. He had lawyers. He challenged the commitment. But the evidence was overwhelming. Experts testified that his violent fantasies hadn't stopped, that his risk to reoffend remained high, that releasing him would be gambling with lives. The court agreed. Gerald Turner was transferred to the Sandridge Secure Treatment Center, a facility for sexually violent persons in Mouston, Wisconsin. Not a prison, but not freedom either. As of today, Turner is still there. Now, in his 70s, his once black hair faded to gray. His name still sends chills through Wisconsin. Every few years, his attorneys file motions for release. Every few years, the courts say no. But Lisa's family never stops watching. They attend every hearing, no matter how routine. They speak up, submit statements, remind the world of what he did and who he did it to. Lisa's story continues to echo across generations. Podcasts, documentaries, true crime channels. Her face, that 9-year-old smile, is as familiar to some as any celebrity. And yet, for her mother, father, and brother, this isn't just history. It's ongoing. Lisa's brother once said in a rare interview, "Every time his name is mentioned, we go back to that night. Every time he tries to get out, we have to fight all over again." That's what life is like when justice isn't permanent. Each Halloween in Fond du Lac, kids still dress up. They still knock on doors. But they do it under the watchful eyes of parents who remember. And every year, someone still leaves a pumpkin at Lisa's grave. A quiet promise, you're not forgotten. Gerald Turner's cell is surrounded by thick walls and armed guards. But he's also surrounded by something else. The weight of a community's rage, the legacy of a girl whose story changed laws, and a mother who refused to let his darkness define her daughter's name. Evil never wins when the world refuses to look away. And in Lisa French's case, the world is still watching.